I ended up having 45 people come from all over the world, from Singapore, China, Maine, New York, Nashville, LA. Thank you for coming. I had some LPs increase their commitment that same day. Over half of my fund came in that last 4 weeks after the AGM. So I guess that's an endorsement for it is worth the time.
I'm not surprised. You punched above the weight class of your typical emerging manager. It was very tight to the second, not the minute, and definitely left wanting more. Sarah, welcome to the Slice Pod, where we uncover the stories of fresh emerging managers across the early stage venture landscape. You are the founder and general partner of the Sarah Smith Fund, a $60 million fund investing 100 to 250K checks in pre-seed and seed across what you call irrationally intense founder CEO-led companies. Was it always the plan to start your own fund and invest in this kind of founders?
If someone says it was always their plan to go in venture, it usually is because they had a parent or a family member that was in it. I grew up outside Milwaukee. Nobody I grew up with thought about private capital markets, let alone early stage venture. My dad worked for the federal government. My mom was a teacher. Business was risky because you didn't get a pension. You could get fired like overnight, which, as we've seen now, is actually also happening in the government, but that was not the case for me growing up. I grew up with these very kind of old school Midwestern values of just work hard until your retirement. And so that was my plan coming out of undergrad, was to be a music teacher.
From there to Silicon Valley, what was that first move? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, one of my favorite LPs, Steve Kim of Virtus, based out in Philadelphia. They have done a lot of study around kind of the luck versus skill ratio that GPs have. And for me, it is so clear that luck just plays such a massive role in our lives. You can make your own luck. I've tried to take advantage of opportunities, but I was very lucky that I had a boyfriend at the time in 2000 who had a software engineering degree and was debating between moving to San Francisco or Seattle. And he happened to pick San Francisco. And that's how I ended up here in 2000, following a boyfriend to the Bay Area right as the dot-com bust happened. I was a teacher, landed a job in private education with Sylvan Learning Centers out in the East Bay. And that's really where I learned a lot about how to run a business. I was good at sales. I became a GM quickly, running $1 million P&L. I never had a business class. I started taking night classes at Berkeley Extension. When I heard about this MBA thing, fortunately, I got good advice to go to a top 5 program. I've got into Stanford GSB, which was life-changing and a big part of how I ended up in venture. It's an incredible school. The night and day difference of what advantages you get trying to start a company out of a place like Stanford versus anywhere else in the world. The statistics show that there's a massive difference, but I have lived that big difference. And I believe you want every advantage when starting a company. And so I'm very bullish on Stanford, the students there, because it was so meaningful and such a big change for me. After the GSB, I had an awesome 10-year career in tech. I fortunately became one of the first advertisers on Facebook in 2007 when the platform launched, and then joined the company in 2008.
Hold on, you started as a customer.
I started as a customer. Yeah.
You were one of the first buyers of ads on the platform.
I was one of the first users because I was fortunate at Stanford. I had an EDU address because I was a grad student. I experienced the product in really 2005, 2006, very early on. It was clear this was going to be big. When I got recruited to the company, the recruiter, like, if you believe this could be a $10 billion company, and here's what your equity is worth. I remember saying, wow, this could be a $100 billion company. And here we are, $1.5 trillion today. But yeah, I was an advertiser working in lead generation, not the sexiest part of the internet. Part of my job was to test new channels. And so fortunately, my roommate at the time was even earlier at Facebook, and I knew about the platform being launched. I was one of the first testers of Facebook ads. The ROI on Facebook ads was blowing everything out of the water, including Google AdWords. I came into my interviews knowing more about the algorithm than the product managers because I had been running real money. And frankly, I'd been gaming the system. I've been telling them, like, here's how everybody's hacking the ad platform. We obviously tweaked the algorithm over time, but it was a really incredible opportunity to come in. When I joined the company, we had 2 inside sales reps. I was brought in to start the account management team. Advertisers could only pay with credit card. We didn't have invoicing. It was incredibly early. And then after the IPO, I did feel the company was only 4,000 people at the time, but it did start to feel slower to me. And I think that's a theme throughout is that I really love early. I love that kind of openness. Oh, we don't have invoicing. Can you go figure it out and build it? I love the messiness, openness, and white space. I had been friends with the Quora founders, Adam and Charlie, from when I had been at Facebook. And I'm actually the 45th user of Quora. So I was in the office the first day. It had a prototype to try granola bars, bottled water, and not much else. I'd been a groupie of the company from the earliest days until they raised the Series B. I joined to help run operations, HR, recruiting, and then stayed and launched monetization and ran sales. And I was it for about 5.5 years, which was an incredible opportunity to not only work for Adam, one of the best technologists in the world, and now on the board of OpenAI and a great supporter of the fund. But we also had a very specific recruiting strategy there as well, where we went after what we thought were the most competitive programmers and coders, because Adam had experience as a competitive coder competing in the International Olympiad of Informatics. And so I had the opportunity to recruit people like Alexander Wang, who at 17 joined us and by 18 was running the infrastructure team. We also recruited Johnny Ho and Dennis Yards, co-founders of Perplexity, and Danny Guo, who started Pika in the generative video space. That was really informative for me now as an investor because I got to see engineering talent and truly see the world's best. Until you've worked with that caliber of talent, it's hard to discern. You can read about it, listen to podcasts, but
If you don't know what that tastes like, you'll never sniff it out in someone.
it's humbling. The clock speed, determination, grit, resilience, creativity, it's special and it's really rare. And that's what I love is the opportunity to go find the next generation of people who have that special kind of irrational intensity. This doesn't typically show up overnight. Like people show signs of this competitiveness very, very early in their life. So they are people who are competing in international competitions, athletics, or debate. They have a deep desire to win. It's innate.
It's a fire. You either have it or you don't. You can get really warm, but you're never going to be burning to the same extent. Were you angel investing very early, or is it something that came with time? How did that transition from operator to investor came to be?
I definitely was not angel investing early. I had no money. I did not have money until the Facebook IPO. I paid my student loans. And a year or two later, a few classmates who also worked at Facebook and had been roommates of mine, and I'd hear them talk about this like Graph Ventures thing where they were sort of doing this angel investing thing. I was like, what is this thing? They were like, oh, we invest in companies. We pooled our money together and we just write checks into our network. Like we invested in this person that we all know. And I was like, why did you guys ask me to be a part of this club? Because they were like my brothers, classmates I was close to. They completely admitted, they were like, we had no idea you'd be interested. And these are really good guys. And they were just like, we totally was a gender lens. Like it was all guys in this group. There were about 7 of them raising the next vehicle, the third vehicle of Graph. They called me up and asked if I wanted to take a spot. That's how I got my start. I spent nights and weekends at Quora meeting founders, learning by doing. I made about 20 investments with that group I sourced. One was BetterUp, invested at the seed, running HR, procured coaching for executives, seen and lived the problem space. I also could tell very quickly that Alexei was a special founder who had deep domain expertise and had what I now call irrational intensity. And I went from meeting him to wiring in 24 hours. It's one of the best investments I've ever made. And you can overthink things at pre-seed and seed. And so much of it is really about the founder. You can't underweight the founder domain insight, expertise, and drive when you're making decisions very early on.
You have to meet a few to know what that feels like. But once you have that pattern recognition, I agree. If you don't feel compelled to write a check on the spot, if you're not like, oh my God, please take my money, it's likely not going to be great. More often than not, you're coming up with reasons why you should do the investments versus reasons why you shouldn't. That's not a great way of investing, especially when you have access to the networks that you have access to. Meta, Quora, Bain, GSP. You could have joined any platform fund you ever wanted to. You would approach just like balls through Sandhill Road and got a job as an investor anywhere. Why do it alone? Why your own solo GP fund?
Going to Aileen Lee's GM, someone I could see myself in, like I could actually imagine, and seeing her do it in her own way. I think that opened my eyes to running my own fund. You drive up and down Sandhill, you see logos that have earned a history, but they do things a certain way. And I thought that was the only way that venture was done. And to see Aileen and how she was building a very different kind of firm made me imagine maybe I could raise my own funds someday or raise a fund with the Graph team. We'd never taken outside capital. And I talked to a lot of people that I respect, and a lot of people, this was around 2018 when I knew I was going to go into investing full time. And a lot of people gave me good advice, which was like, it's one thing to invest as an angel, another to manage a fund. I took that advice and I did meet a lot of funds because I figured, why not play free agency? Like, at minimum, I will co-invest with these people. Bain wasn't on my radar. They were new to San Francisco. Most people I knew at Bain were in the private equity team, which is very different end of the spectrum than what I do. But they found me through a former colleague at Facebook, Jocelyn, who's now started Zeta Ventures. And I was really impressed with the team. Every conversation I had, I felt like it was an extremely intellectually deep team that really did their work on diligence and were very thoughtful. And I felt like I would learn a lot at Bain. That was a big part of the decision to go there and the opportunity to build the brand more in the Bay Area. And so I did ultimately go and join as a partner, and good on them. When I was in labor with my first baby, they promoted me to managing director, the first female partner managing director in the ventures team in 20 years. Incredibly supportive partnership. I learned an incredible amount and also got to take over the fund of funds program while I was there. So my predecessor, Salil Deshpande, who's now started Uncorrelated Ventures, had started as a fund. I took over the program and felt like we had a potential to increase our sourcing capabilities by investing in one of the emerging managers. At that time in 2019, this is when AngelList was really starting to unlock a lot of back office and fund admin tools to make the overhead for managers significantly less to get started. And so we were just at the early innings of seeing many great emerging managers come out, including people like Weekend Funds. Abstract Ventures had been an early investment of the fund. Sriram Krishnan, who's now at Kearney Jackson, like a lot of great managers were coming up at that time. And so I didn't necessarily join Bain knowing I would start my own fund. I thought I might stay there forever. At a minimum, I would learn something. Over 4 years, I figured out a couple of things. One, I really love early pre-seed and seed. I don't enjoy a Series B, C, D stage. It's hard to do that as a partner in $1 billion fund. If you look at the math of what you need to do at those fund sizes, there's a certain amount of money you have to put to work every year to earn your spot and stay there. A lot of people move upstream and start doing more Bs and Cs and Ds. That's just not where I do my best work or what I love. So I also had the opportunity to review, 400 decks of emerging managers while running the fund of funds. And I was collaborating with a lot of them. So I started to develop some opinions around what I thought it would take to build the top decile fund. That's what got me to the point of deciding to start my own fund in 2022.
Let's get into it, because you don't just run a solo fund. You build AI products for your own use. You run a fellowship. You have 2 wonderful kids. How do you keep everything straight? Or is this a cakewalk compared to the early days of Facebook? And nothing will match that intensity.
I'm a teacher by training, and teachers have this really interesting job day to day where there's a planning element. You write lesson plans, have a long and short-term goal of what you want to accomplish. And then at the same time, you're reacting to the people in front of you and what kind of potential do they have and how can you bring the most out of them. And so this job is really a crazy combination of extremely long-term, quite a bit of short-term planning, and huge people element where you are working with founders day to day, you're working with LPs day to day, working with co-investors. And I deeply love finding the best in people. Like, that is a big part of who I have been. For me, it's a joy to be in the moment in these contexts as an investor, trusted advisor, co-investor, an LP in a number of funds, helping other GPs. But then as a mom and a wife and a daughter and sister-in-law, how do I do it? I work a lot. I hear people say when you have kids, you work smarter. I think I was working smarter. Now I just sleep less and I try to be pretty ruthless about prioritization of my time. I'd say the other hack here is that when people say like, how do you do it? I'm like, you should see my Monday calendar now compared to Facebook. My internal meetings are with me. I don't have a bunch of one-to-ones every week. I have no standing meetings. When you take all the standing meetings out, you have a lot of time. So that is like, I think one kind of secret awesome opportunity for solo GPs is that you actually have a lot of time towards running the fund.
You have to accept that you're going to be working 24/7. That means that you're constantly thinking, no clocking out, no weekends, no evenings. So there is no podcast on the way to work.
When building your own fund, putting your name on the door, it's such an awesome responsibility. It never turns off, but it's deeply fulfilling because all the consequences, good and bad, begin and end with you. And that's something I'd never fully experienced. I'd always worked for other people. And I loved those opportunities. I had some incredible career chapters. But this is probably the closest I had of a feeling of what it's like to actually start a company. And it's by no means the same. Like founders deal with a different kind of stress. But the feeling of deep 100% ownership is really something special.
Let's talk about the AI piece. Tell us how useful it is and the pitfalls you've learned along the way.
I'm so inspired by what's possible for solo GPs with AI. I think we can do 10 times more for our founders in a tenth of the time. It really makes scaling a significant portfolio possible for a solo GP. I by no means think this is a sustainable advantage. I think everyone will be doing this in the next few years. I am surprised at how slow our industry has been to adopt AI. A big advantage I have as a solo GP is I get to decide what risks I'm willing to take. And I felt very comfortable going all in, building on top of Claude. A lot of early core employees are at Claude. I know the origin story of the people who left to start Anthropic. And I felt like there was a very deep commitment to safety. And I felt very comfortable putting a lot of my data on top of Claude. And one reason I did that was that I actually had been debating buying software. I was testing their product, but I thought you now have the ability to really build what you want. I told Claude, let's build a framework to evaluate an investment opportunity. Imagine you are the best trained associate at a top tier global fund. Design a framework to quickly assess top of funnel opportunities. And there's more to the prompt than that, but essentially started to iterate with Claude almost as a co-pilot on a 100-point framework. I'm now on version 4.1 of that framework. So I've made a lot of adjustments over time. Every time you take a first meeting, you have run some algorithm in your head to decide whether or not that is a meeting that could be a fit for you. And so the challenge is could you codify to a 100-point framework? What were the factors that made you say yes or no? What are the things that get you to saying yes to a first meeting versus no? Is it the founder profile, vertical, business model, TAM, competitors? It's probably all those things, but you give it a certain weighting based on your strategy for your fund. And so what I did was try to distill what's the weighting that I am giving to different factors. And then I supplemented that with research. For example, Ilya Strobolev, who's a professor at Stanford, has written a huge body of work looking historically at unicorn companies from 1997 to the present. And it's a massive data set. They've looked at every single variable you can imagine. And that's something you can just buy and add into your Claude project. And so I did that and asked it to recommend some changes based on what we have learned historically about what produces unicorn companies. And then again, you're in the driver's seat as the investor. So I could still decide, yes, I want to take that suggestion, or no, I don't want to take that suggestion. The model, I think, has gotten very, very good at helping me increase the quality of first meetings.
Obviously, it doesn't replace the decision you can make of the structured data that it gives you. What else do you think you can do with this technology?
Part of what I try to offer as a value add that's unique is people operations expertise. So I ran HR for a number of years at Core. I ran recruiting. Pre-seed and seed founders do not have someone full-time doing this typically, and it is on them. And it's often the most stressful part of their job, managing interpersonal dynamics, people issues, recruiting, very time-consuming. One thing that I saw and appreciated coming out of Facebook was how much having very clear company values helped us in so many ways. It helped us with clarity around recruiting and telling a story about what we want and what we expect in terms of behavior and the type of people who are going to thrive in that environment. It also helped in rewarding people who were living those values, but also putting consequences and firing people outside of those values. It's a way to quickly get people running efficiently towards your goal. For younger founders, it's helpful for them to continue to have their North Star about what they want to be doing as a founder. The values should stem from who they are as a person, because that will evolve over time. Some core tenets of their values are not going to change. This company, I'm betting on people who can go all the way to IPO and beyond. Having those values clearly articulated gives them a strong foundation to help them as a leader when they face difficult decisions and trade-offs. So one thing I did was I went out to one of my companies and I interviewed the first 6 employees, including the 2 founders, just for 20 minutes each. I asked them simple questions to get to the heart of their culture and what it's like to work at that particular company. One of my favorite questions was, what are the unwritten rules that someone should know if they join here? Took notes on that. I didn't record it because I think people get really nervous when you have an AI recorder going on and you really want to get that unfiltered information, but I took pretty good notes. And then I fed that into a Claude project where I also fed a bunch of research around best practices in outlining and codifying company values. Together, we've iterated on distilling it down to 5 company values and why those things were important to that company. I went over it with the whole company. And it's only been a week, but already I have heard stories from them about how it's helped them make important decisions around what they want to reward with employees, what kinds of candidates they want to attract. It also helps them articulate their identity and feel proud about where they're working. Competing as an AI company with $100 million packages being offered, recruiting is an intense war. Having values you feel proud of helps attract the right people and sometimes make big cash trade-offs to join your startup.
It feels like rumors about AI eating the job of the VC have been exaggerated, but eating the role of the platform team. That may not sit on the investment team directly, but they contribute with their knowledge, helping on recruiting, governance, company building, all that stuff. That's where that value add comes from. You get to compete head to head by giving a service that your founders don't need to pay.
I'm also using AI to help me figure out where should I be spending my time in the portfolio. It's easy to get caught up in spending your time on the companies that aren't going to drive value. So those that are struggling the most often ask for the most. Obviously, you do want to help everyone out as best you can, but I think the best GPs recognize quickly who are going to be the drivers of this portfolio and how do I do as much as I can to tilt the odds in their favor. AI helps me do that. I keep track of the portfolio health, management tracking. You get lots of very differently structured data when you get company updates. And that's the perfect kind of thing for AI to help with as well.
Which frees up time to spend with humans that bring a different kind of value. Let's talk about the fellowship, because I feel like where a solo GP would invest their time in having a junior associate to fill in spreadsheets, you're actually bringing on folks that bring a different kind of value. How did you come up with the idea of the fellowship?
You're right. It is not typical for there to be excellent fellowships or internships in venture. What I noticed going to Bain out of operating careers at Quora and Facebook, internships was a huge lifeblood of our recruiting program. We would get people in when they were sophomores, juniors in college, knowing that the real payoff was they would join full-time for 2 or 3 years. Venture works differently. A few partners inside of firms, they likely stay in the seat for 10 years plus, if not longer. There's not as much internal mobility. Some firms like Bessemer is famous for growing internally, but most firms, I'd say the majority of their partner hiring comes from outside. So it makes sense that structurally this industry isn't set up well to offer great internship programs. It's also very sporadic. We don't know when a great deal is going to hit. So you can't promise greatness over the summer to an intern. When I started at Bain, I felt there was an opportunity to build stronger relationships, especially at Stanford. All of my partners had gone to HBS and I was the only GSB alum. So I wanted to build stronger relationships at Stanford. I started a traditional internship opportunity while I was at Bain for 10 weeks. It was to shadow me and work with the team. I did that for 3 years at Bain. And those alums are now partners at Amplify, Menlo Ventures, and a founder at Work, which I backed as an investor. So those 3 alums I'm really proud of. And then when I solo, I thought to myself, I don't know that it's really fair to bring one person and hang out with just me for 10 weeks. I have 2 kids now, and I kind of want to do stuff with them over the summer. But I was like, there's got to be something. And so one thing I remembered at the GSB, we start late. The term actually starts at like later September. So there's this interesting 3 to 4 week pre-term period from when internships end to when school starts. People often do study trips or they do different things. And I thought, what if I could own that 3 to 4 weeks and create what the world's best venture internship? Brainstorming with a few people, I got the idea of, instead of having one, what if I had this be a cohort? And that would also be really interesting, because then it's not just learning from me, it's learning from each other. And so we kicked that off, just about to do the 3rd cohort this year. And it's been incredible. Students apply in spring. This year I had 35 applicants for 3 spots. And the 3 people, I take them to a very intensive 3 weeks where we go and visit 25 GPs at 25 different firms, as well as usually a handful of LPs. So the goal is threefold. When I left the GSB, I thought it was only the 6 firms that you see on Sandhill. I did not realize massive diversity of how venture can be done. And so my hope is that students leave this fellowship really appreciating that there are so many different ways to do venture, and start to develop an opinion about what's a great fit for them. So for example, I have a very high velocity model. I invest in 15 to 20 companies per year. There are other people who really love to go deep and invest in 1 company per year. In fact, I have a fellow from last summer who that's indeed what she discovered throughout the summer, and she has now joined Redpoint, and that is a perfect fit for her. So finding the right fit and developing a sense of what you really want helps in so many ways, for long-term success, for prioritizing where you're going to recruit, all those different things. How do they develop their own unique edge as an investor? Coming out of the GSB, it can be tough to kind of figure out how do you articulate what value add do you bring if you don't have a long operating career. But everyone has uniqueness if they got into a place like that. And so helping them to figure out what's their edge. And then lastly, I hope it's a long-term relationship with them. So I actually give each of my fellows $50K of the fund to invest. And the default is yes, so long as it fits the fund parameters. And that gives them a few things. 1, an excuse to hunt while they're on campus during their second year. It gives us an excuse to stay in touch. And by the way, I give them carry on that 50K. So they start to build a track record. They have economic upside to that investment. And it also gives them an opportunity to talk about a case study when they go interview. They may not have money to invest directly, but now they have a full investment that they have full attribution over, and they can talk about in interviews. And in a number of cases, I've actually increased to 100 or even 200K and the investments that they've proposed because I liked the company. The other thing I get out of it is that anytime anyone starts anything out of the GSB, I essentially can back channel reference them within minutes because I have everyone on WhatsApp or text. And so I know at least 3 or 4 of their classmates that I truly trust who are going to tell me, oh my gosh, run as fast as possible to go invest in this person, or I would maybe not take the first meeting. So those references really matter and help prioritize time. It is a great way for me to stay in touch with my GP network. I bring talented people to Mecca at First Round, Jake at Emergence, Sarah at Emerson, James and Angela at Andreessen Horowitz. I always kick it off with Tribe, actually. So I've known Arjun for a long time and Ali. And they do things in a very different way than everyone else. And they're walking distance of my house. So we just like walk on over there. And that is literally day one is, wow, let's think about how a totally different approach to venture with Tribe. These people now have a warm introduction to GPs that can lead to co-investment opportunities. In many cases, has led to jobs. So James joined Andreessen after our internship. Priscilla has now joined Redpoint. And again, as I mentioned, alums at Amplify and Menlo. And so over time, I hopefully will have fellows at literally every firm.
Our thesis on you is the network of networks. You start with the people function in a dense talent network. I love how you keep doubling down and compounding into that space and spreading the tentacles all over Silicon Valley. It's super smart. One more thing before the more personal piece of the interview. It's AGMs. You've written about AGMs and how those are a key component of the GP-LP relationship. Most managers out there do a terrible job at putting up an AGM. And I've been to yours and I cannot stop reading about it. How did you go about setting up your AGM? What was the guiding principle? I'm curious, how did you get to pull out such a perfect product? What was the thinking process? A lot of managers listening could learn a thing or two on how to go about architecting their own experience.
With my fellowship, I aim to have the world's best venture fellowship. And I think as approaching an AGM, I thought about it similarly. What do the world's best AGMs look like? So I did quite a bit of research and talked to lots of LPs that I admire and trust. I'd been to some AGMs at Bain and Cowboy, but not a ton. And so a lot of it came from just literally what I learned from talking to LPs, and I'm happy to share my Cliff Notes because I think it's important for emerging managers to consider. I'd say the first thing that's most important is that as an emerging manager, you clearly define what your goals are and what your themes are going to be. What do you really want to convey and to whom? So to give you an example, for me, heading towards my first close, I needed to do it by May 19th. And so I felt like doing an AGM at least a month ahead of my final close, ideally, was important. Sometime in April was going to be opportunistic. So I could have my existing LPs come who might increase their commitments, but also potentially prospects who still would have enough time to get to final close. I wanted to emphasize Stanford, so I made sure to hold it near Stanford and have founders who came out of the Stanford ecosystem, as well as highlight my fellowship program. I wanted people to leave with a deeper sense of the strategy. So I back Irrationally Intense founders. I wanted to highlight people like that. I also invested 50 companies per fund. So I wanted to show that I have enough top of funnel to support building a quality portfolio. I wanted to highlight how I am going about building the fund for scale. And that's really where talking through a lot of the AI capabilities, as well as anecdotes from my founders of how I have supported them in a unique way, I thought was important. I think the other key things I wanted people to see was that I was serious. I am really building a fund. I think when you hold an AGM and you bring people together, it does set you apart from the tourists. There are a lot of tourists starting funds. It's a big risk for an LP to back a fund one because they don't know if you're going to do this for the rest of your career. Holding an AGM is a way to demonstrate that you really mean to build a fund for the long haul. And then the last benefit, at least for me, was that there is also just a lot to be said about social proof. A lot of LPs like to see who else has underwritten you, compare notes. And so having a mix of your existing as well as prospects, I think can go a really long way and help them feel really confident in their decision to invest with you. The most important is really keep your programming tight. I think it's always good to leave people wanting more. Like the wedding speech that's just a little bit too short, great. Everyone's really happy about that. Same thing with an AGM. You want people leaving wanting more. For me, I felt a half day was plenty. I'm a parent. I knew a lot of my LPs were parents. They'd appreciate not being tied up for an evening. So I had a 9:30 breakfast, content from 10 to 12, and then lunch, and really good food. Like one tip I had gotten from an LP was it's awful for them to show up to an AGM and sit through 3 hours on an empty stomach. Another piece I heard from LPs was do not start with a death march of metrics and, like fund by fund, investment by investment. Like you'll lose people fast. It is totally fine to start with like some basic macro, but don't start with a death march content. Make sure have a strong keynote founder. Do something a little bit longer form. I had Lucas Heffer from Costco. He's a Stanford GSB grad, one of the standouts in the portfolio for my concept fund. It gives a sense of the kind of company that you're trying to invest in. Make sure there's enough time, but not too much time for a founder to detail what they're doing. And also talk a little bit about why they chose you to be in their cap table. So let the founders tell your story. I had another founder panel to highlight more people from the current portfolio. Rather than go from panel to panel and a whole bunch of fireside chats, I broke it up with a bit of an overview of the AI tools that we have built. So I think it's good to mix, solo founder, panel. Think about it, it's almost like a movie or any kind of programming where you want it to feel like something's always new is happening. And then I had a couple of my GSB fellows come back to talk, emphasizing with Stanford, network, programming, and sourcing advantages. And then I capped it up with an outside speaker. I'm fortunate that one of my former teammates from Quora, is now Chief People Officer of Figma. I did not know this at the time, but Figma just filed their S1 right before the AGM, so it turned out to be an even more exciting time to have somebody else speak. And then she could speak to the theme of people operations, which is my value add as a fund. A lot of thought went into the content, telling the themes and the stories, but also keeping it tight, keeping it moving. And we actually kept to pretty much the minute of the agenda. And then I guess the last thing I'd say that I think actually ended up being even more ROI than expected, I did invest in hiring a designer to help with my slides, my program, my name tags. And I think that really helped put a kind of professional touch on the event. I think a lot of times as an emerging manager, you DIY things. And again, if you want to show professional tone, just invest that little bit more in getting a professional to help you with the content. I'd say in all, it's a ton of work 2 weeks beforehand going, oh my gosh, how and why did I sign up to do this? And I ended up having 45 people come, people from all over the world, from Singapore, China, Maine, New York, Nashville, LA. Thank you for coming. I had some LP increase their commitment that same day. Over half of my fund came in that last 4 weeks after the AGM.
Not surprised. It was the best. You punched above the weight class of your typical emerging manager. It was very tight to the second, not the minute, and definitely left wanting more. And you showcased an amazing founder. And I told Sanvu after we debriefed on the way back to the city, this was a genius move that makes it look like every founder in your portfolio. Like now I'm like, oh, everybody's like that. Honestly, it was like a fine dining experience. Reduce the menu, but elevate the quality. The death march is most of the time just a relentless carousel of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and very unexciting. Your 3 hours of content went through super quick because it had that rhythm. It was interesting. And from an emerging manager of a sub $20 million fund, I don't know anybody else who did anything remotely as good. We have some people that have like really good data rooms that we use as a reference. On the AGM side, we use you. This is the bar you need to meet. As a prospecting tool, I also agree with you for a first-time manager to show up in person, have people engage with others as well, right? Have a reflection of you that it's unfiltered from you and it's a reflection from others. It's so important. It makes such a big difference. I am not surprised half the fund came in the 4 weeks after, because it was truly a statement of this is the level of quality that you can expect from this product. And it spoke volumes. Let's get a little personal as we wrap things up. You did your angel investing, you had a rolling fund right before this one, your concept fund. This is fund one, let's call it, but it's essentially fund two. What does the next one look like? Is it a continuation of the same thesis? Is there a desire that the Sarah Smith fund becomes a platform, one of the big names? What's the long-term view?
I want to be the best at this craft and this size fund. Strategy drift is a real issue for lots of funds and where performance starts to go down. I'm a large LP in my own fund. I've committed almost 5% of the capital myself. I want to continue that fund by fund. I love what I'm doing at Stanford. I love how I support founders. And I think that really maxes out at, like I said, a 500K check size. I think there's a chance that the fund size will increase modestly into fund two. I closed 16 in the final close for fund one, which allows me to do 50 checks of 250K. I can imagine going up to maybe 60 positions at 400, maybe up to 500K. But I think it's really important to stay true to your craft and what you do. And again, like a big part of my advantage is that I am collaborative with, like, I love being in the broker position. I often meet founders before they have their lead or even before they've incorporated. And it's an advantage to get to conviction myself, but then introduce them to the right lead. When someone tells me their story of what they're building, I know exactly which 10 partners, not even just which 10 firms, which partners at those firms are likely going to be the best fit for this founder. And when I can make that connection, then I almost am guaranteed exactly the allocation that I want. But if I start tipping beyond that 500K check size or having a massive team, all of that really could go away. I think this recipe gives me a great shot at having legendary funds for decades to come.
The strategy drift, it's a very LP way of saying it. From a manager perspective, you're losing the value of compounding because you're changing everything about your firm with every vintage. meaning you're not compounding into what makes you strong. It's even worse for the manager to drift away from their strategy than for the LP. The LP may potentially be better off, or for the manager, you dilute instead of compound into what makes you great. And these things take a long time to bear fruit. And so it's really risky to not be concentrated in the way that you think about building the firm.
Yeah.
Besides the reputational damage that it does, it's something people should take seriously.
I think for people, having that clarity up front on where you want to go by fund 3 or 4 is really important. Also important to be transparent with your LPs. One thing I wish I had done better is filtering for LPs who want this fund size. It's really tempting for, quote, you could call me a spin out, right? I left a big platform, have great credentials, all the things. There's a lot of LPs that I know from many different lives who they would love for me to go build a $250 million product, because then they can put 10 to 15 to 25 million to work. And that is their mandate. They can't get out of bed unless they can write at least a $25 million check. And that's great, but that's not what I'm going to do. It doesn't make sense to invest a lot of time trying to convince that group of people to write a $1 or $2 or $5 million check into my fund, because I'm never going to try to grow to a place where they can write 25. That's just not what I am aspiring to do. I want to keep my funds tight, work with great family offices, fund of funds, other venture funds, people who love writing 5, maybe get to 10. But if you need to write $25 million, I'm not your GP.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So many get swept up by the ego of the number, and most of the times it's a mistake. We couldn't agree more. One thing we didn't chat about, what is the biggest struggle of doing this? Going from an operator role into a big platform, into an emerging manager. What's some of the things that unexpectedly were incredibly hard to do that you didn't appreciate quite as much what challenge it was going to be before you get into this?
The hardest part going from operating to investing full time, and you probably hear this from a lot of people, but the feedback cycle is so long. As an operator, you know, within a year, a quarter, a month, positive and negative feedback that you can react to and improve your craft and improve your ability as an operator, a leader, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. With investing, you just don't know. You can't celebrate when you write the check. You have no idea if you made the right choice for a long time. You can celebrate that you won against another firm. There's some validation that someone else underwrote the deal and also wanted to do it, but you still don't know if both of you are right. You layer in the factor of luck. And I'm an avid strategy board game player. My husband and I play probably 4 or 5 nights a week. We play Terraforming Mars mainly. I think a lot about strategy luck ratio in everything I do. There is a lot of luck in this. And I think that's a hard thing to stomach if you are an achiever, if you're an intense operator, if you're someone who likes to get things done and likes input and output. When people say if your picking ability is 100% skill, it's like, okay, great. You could have picked a bunch of great companies and then a pandemic hits. To say it's 100% skill is just hubris. There is a lot of what we do that is luck-based. I think that is the hardest part. You just don't know if you're good. I'm doing everything I can to be exceptional, but I still don't know for sure. And I won't know for a long time. And so I think it's one of these things where you have to have so much patience, so much passion for what we do and belief in what we do. And then just have hopefully the support of awesome LPs and hopefully your family at home to do this for many years. But I can't tell you how lucky I feel to do this every day and to do it in this way, to go from being a teacher in the lowest income school in Madison, Wisconsin, teaching in a basement classroom, making $27,000 a year, to now running a $16 million fund. It's incredible. I feel lucky every day.
Welcome back for season 3. Thank you so much to Nicole for introducing us to Sarah. And next up, we have Finn of Nebular Ventures, who's somehow always ahead of the curve. We're excited to share so many amazing conversations with the most talented emerging managers this season. So make sure to tune in and subscribe to our Substack if you're not already there.